Hey, doctoral student, thank you so much for tuning in to this video. Now, this is a video of my first oral defense. I was a student at Walden University, and I was studying employee turnover and servant leadership, which you all see in the video. So some things to know about this. So we all got mixed up on the times, and I just had to scramble and get myself ready. I wasn't prepared, and but you know mentally, but we did it, and it came out well. um Now, what are some tips, some things that I could share to help on your journey, because there may not be very many things out there that can help you decipher what you need to do and how you need to do it in order to get past the oral defense, because it's a very scary, nerve-wracking, intense event. So for me, what I did is I looked at other examples of oral defenses. Um, like I said, I attended Walden, so they have a page that's kind of, I wouldn't say it's hidden, but it's not really easy to find. And they have a list of oral defenses that you can look at and see what they're like and see what's going on. So I did that. And the one thing I noticed is that the chairs and the professors, they asked specific questions to people who did not cite various things. In the video, you'll see me actually say the name of my references and cite those sources directly about the important things. So if you do that, you take away their ability to ask those questions. Another thing, what I did is I I set up my presentation. I set up my PowerPoint in such a way where I had extra information in the notes section, but in bold print, I I bolded the things that I wanted to say. So when I was in present mode and then I had my notes on the other side, I was able to see exactly what to say, and I read that. And then if I had to refer back to it, then I had more information there, like the citations and things like that, so it could further support what I was doing. So that was very good. Another tip is, don't write too much on your slide. We tend to always write a lot. We put a lot of information. We want to say everything in the slide because we think they need to read it. But the point of this oral defense is to show that you know your study, you know the material, and you know what's going on. So I say save that writing for your notes section and have several short bullets, just enough to pique their attention, because you want them to tune into what you're saying and not read what you wrote, because anybody can do that. And using that strategy, you may be able to read some and interject your own knowledge into that, and then make sure presentation flow a bit smoother. And I would say, relax. Don't be afraid to be yourself. You'll see I did that, toward the end. And just talk to them, because their purpose is to help you get past this hump, to move you on to the next step. So, before we get on to the video, I'll say if you have a cohort of friends, someone to go through this with, please do that. Talk to them, share your slideshows, critique one another, get advice. That's the biggest thing that can help you get through, is that friendship, that camaraderie, and just being able to lean on one another. So without further ado, here is my oral presentation. If you have any questions, leave me some comments. I'll get to them and try to answer them the best I can, and try to help. So anyway, good luck. God bless. And hopefully I'll see you later, doctor.
Okay. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the title, like Dr. Wentz just said, the impact of servant leadership on employee turnover in a warehousing environment. And first of all, I would like to thank the faculty members that's on this call with me, my chair, Dr. Wentz, The second committee member, Dr. Pouch, sorry if I mispronounced your name, the URR, Dr. Kaysen, and our program director, Dr. Mouse. Thank you all. So we'll begin with the background to this whole problem. And the background has three distinct parts that all kind of play together to lead to our problem. That's unprecedented growth, jobs and opportunities for port customers, and difficulty reducing the rate of turnover. So the unprecedented growth is due to the explosion of growth at the Port of Savannah. And according to Georgia Ports Authority, this year in 2021, they are the fastest growing port in the nation. And that leads us to opportunities. So because of the rapid growth of the Georgia Ports Authority and the Georgia ports, they have created over 440,000 jobs across the state of Georgia with $106 billion in revenue. And they have an income exceeding $25 billion annually. And that's from the Georgia Ports Authority report from 2020. They have plans to expand the Georgia ports by up to 9 million TEUs by 2030. And a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent. And it's a unit of measure used to measure capacity for ships and the ports. So one TEU is one 20-foot container, a 40-foot container is 2 TEUs. So this expansion can lead to additional opportunities and jobs for port customers. And these port customers are the local warehouses, various truck drivers, independent operators, logistics companies, and motor carriers. Now, these job opportunities flow into a problem that's been identified, and that's reducing turnover. And men in this study from 2007 found that problems with warehousing turnover are the lack of job security, the lack of personal attention and experience. And these things can be mitigated by the action of supervisors because their actions and the policies and their interactions trickle down to frontline employees. And that was found by Lang et al. 2016 and Reyna et al. 2018. So moving forward to our problem and purpose. The specific problem is that warehouse supervisors lack turnover reduction strategies. In December of 2019, warehousing organizations in the southern United States reported losing about 250,000 employees to voluntary and involuntary turnover. And that comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2020. Looking further down, the research method that I have chosen is a qualitative methodology. And according to Raymond 2020, qualitative research allows the researcher to gather detailed descriptions of the participants' opinions, experiences, and feelings while interpreting the meanings of their actions. So that's why I chose a qualitative method, because it allowed me to kind of dig a little further and find out what successful warehouse supervisors are doing to reduce turnover. The research design that I chose was a multiple case study, and Healy and Twycross from 2018 discovered that a multiple case study allows the researcher to compare the data from multiple cases to gain a more comprehensive perspective of the research question. So it's not all just focused in one place, but by using this method, I can take data from several different locations and find the similarities and difference to come to a more comprehensive conclusion. Research design, again, that's going to be the multiple case study. So now we're looking at the business impact. This study and the business problem is increased turnover and lack of strategies to reduce that. How that affects businesses is that the increased turnover, it increased cost overall. So I found from several authors on Dutta and Kari, they said that a high turnover rate causes stagnation in the growth of organizations. And we have to minimize that in order to protect the organization from failure. Now, in a warehousing environment, especially the one that we've already set up with the Port of Savannah with its rapid expansion, the increase in turnover will cause these companies and these organizations not to be able to take full advantage of the increased expansion of the Port of Savannah. So this business impact, it affects the port because they're expanding and they can't get the service that they need to continue their expansion. It affects the local businesses because they participate and they benefit from that expansion. They have more business opportunities, and also it affects the surrounding community because the community relies on that growth to keep moving forward. Now, this problem also has a social impact. And if you look at the slide that we have here, we have increased health problems, mortality, less tax revenue, and the ability to support specific programs. Now, when turnover increases within an organization, the employees are also affected. Not having employment could be directly linked to not having health insurance or not having the funds available to add healthy things to their lives or to seek medical treatment. The impact of that mortality, it's been found that people, they die earlier. And that's what Vasquez found in his 2014 study, that the people were immensely affected. He also found that the tax revenue gained from the local counties and the state were decreased because the people don't have jobs to pay these taxes. Also, that impacted their ability to support these specific public programs. So, to like daycares for children, giving money to them, having programs that support vocational education. The funds are not available for these programs when the people who are paying taxes into this are not working. So let's move forward to the research question. So the research question that we're looking at is, what strategies do warehouse supervisors use to reduce involuntary turnover? Now, that's directly related to the general business problem and the specific business problem that I have identified in the study we've written so far. The general business problem is that employee turnover harms workers and costs warehousing organizations millions of dollars each year. Now, that leads into the specific problem that warehouse supervisors lack strategies to reduce turnover. So this research question directly addresses the specific business problem. And also the data shows that this is a problem because in 2019 of December 2019, warehousing organizations, like I said earlier, lost 251,000 employees in 1 month, in the month of December. And if you couple that with the cost that these turnovers cause organization, it represents a huge problem because turnover costs can range from 90% to 200% of an employee's salary. Now, Harm et al. In 2017 discovered that. So that could represent an astronomical cost, even if they're on an hourly wage. You know, $10 an hour times 200% is quite a large amount to have to lose because we can't reduce turnover. So our next slide talks about the conceptual framework that I've chosen. Now, the name of the theory that I chose was servant leadership. And servant leadership was pioneered by Robert Greenleaf in 1977. And as Eva et al. 2019 stated, servant leadership is a follower-oriented, multidimensional leadership theory that focuses on the leader, focusing on the needs of the followers first to achieve the organizational goals. Now, the reason why I chose that and how this interfaces with what I'm studying is that Min 2007 found, again, like I said earlier, that the main causes of warehouse turnover are job security, lack of personal attention, and experience. And Lang and Rayner also found, as I mentioned earlier, that the influence of top and middle line leaders, it trickles down to the employees. So that directly calls to why the turnover rate is higher and what causes it. Now, if you look at the key constructs of servant leadership, it's listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of followers, and building community. Now, those things is what supervisors and leaders can possess that trickles down to their employees, and the employees could use those traits and gain advantage from that to feel better and to also participate in their jobs. It would reduce what's happening with the lack of personal attention. That also deals with their experience and the job security. So they get to be a part of that thanks to the influence of the supervisor. So here we have the method and design that I chose. Now, I'm going to do a qualitative research study. And the reason why that's important is because it allows me to capture, understand, investigate, answer, gather, and interpret the data. So we can do all of those things at one time, not just one piece or something different. The research design that I chose was a multiple case study. And as I said earlier, a multiple case study allows me to take several different avenues and pull all of those things together and see how the data is similar across several different sites. And again, that design allows us to identify patterns, characteristics, investigate, understand complex issues in a real world setting. And that's what Oshman, Witzel et al., and Healy and Tarkwas found in their work. So the next part is the participants and sample size. So the participants will be warehouse supervisors that directly supervise frontline employees in various distribution centers. And the qualifications for this person is they need to be employed in that position for at least 1 year and work in southeastern Georgia, because that's where the study takes place and that's where the phenomenon is happening. Now, the sample size for this will be 6 participants, and that number is based upon the work of Guest et al. 2006. And in their work, they found that qualitative data saturation occurs within like the first 12 interviews. But you can get meaningful themes and you can interpretate evidence in as early as 6 interviews. So what I would like to do is interview 6 participants, and I'll just keep going until I get data saturation, and that may end up happening at 12 as according to their work. And what made me choose this and go along with what they found is that they conducted 60 interviews with a group of people in Africa. And they found that after 12, they found similarities. The data saturation happened after 12. But then when they analyzed their data, they saw that after 6, they had enough to develop those themes and different aspects that they wanted to study. So they recommend that 6 is the smallest size, but more than 12 cause problems in the study. So for me, I'll start with 6, but if we have to add more, then we can keep going. And I really think that once we hit about 12, we'll start seeing that data saturation happen. So this slide talks about the data collection techniques plans. So this is what I plan to do. And there are 4 areas that I plan to address. And that's the interview protocol, semi-structured interviews, member checking, and triangulation. If you look at the gray box for interview protocol, there are 3 main sections that this interview protocol has. And it's a brief introduction, a procedure for establishing informed consent, and the interview questions. And the interview protocol is something that's there for me to follow as I conduct these interviews, step by step. And it's included to reduce the bias that I may have, and it won't taint the evidence or the interviews or the responses that the participants give. Now, during these interviews, I plan on using semi-structured interviews. So that's going to encompass open-ended questions, and it will be recorded. Open-ended questions are important because also 2017 said that researchers should shy away from unstructured interviews and ensure that they have some sort of structure and focus, because that leads to a lot of, you would get different information from each one and it won't flow. And recording the interviews, Yin 2017, which we've all read that, and he is a prolific author in terms of qualitative interviews. He specifically said that recordings of interview sessions are more precise than handwritten notes. So I will be recording the interviews to ensure that I capture all of the things that the participants intend to say, and that I'm able to take in everything and catch all the nuances of each interview. Now, after the interviews are over, we're going to do some member checking. And that involves me transcribing the data which is the responses from the interviewees or the participants. I'm going to summarize that data, interpret it. That's when we assign the themes and separate it out into different things. And we're going to have an accuracy check. And that's an important part of member checking. And Candela 2019 said that participants can check the accuracy of the data through member checking. And that's important because they're able to say, yeah, that's something I said, that's what I meant to say, or they can say, no, I really meant this. And the important part of that is it allows me to have a follow-up time to speak with the participants, and you're able to glean additional information or rectify something that I may have interpreted the wrong way. So member checking is definitely important. And finally, the last part is the triangulation. So for triangulation, we're going to use the secondary organizational documents. And for this study, we're going to use some public documents that may be available, or if the participants can provide documents or point me to documents that are publicly available, we can use those to triangulate the data. And why triangulation is important, and this is one of the most important steps, is that it allows us to validate the convergence of the finding and sources of methods. And that's what Farquhar said in his 2020 study. So moving on to the data analysis part of this. So if you look at our infographic that's there, all of these parts are together, but they all are linked. And no one part is more important than the next. So they all can be adjusted at the same time. And this particular data analysis strategy, I got this from Braun and Clark in their 2006 study. And what they pioneered was the idea of thematic analysis. And thematic analysis, according to Braun and Clark, has 6 steps. And those steps, they It provides a logical and sequential order for doing things. And these are the steps. So first, you must become familiar with the data, which happens through the transcription process and reading through the data and listening to the recordings. The second thing you do is you generate coding categories. So as you listen to the data, you can find similarities in different categories of codes to use when you review the rest of the data. The third step is to generate the themes from those codes. Then you're going to review those themes because they can change as you listen and you transcribe more interviews. Sometimes the themes change. You may find that things may fit more neatly into one basket or another, or you may add additional themes. Then you're going to define and name the themes after you review them. And finally, you're going to produce a report that gathers all of the information together and funnels it into a format that's easy to read, easy to understand, and that encompasses all of the interviews. So with that is the closing. And Dr. Winch and Dr. Pouch, I would like to thank you for listening to what I've had to say about this upcoming study, and I appreciate all of your effort and your time that you've put into me. So this concludes my first oral defense. So now I would like to invite you to ask your questions. Let's see, I think I stopped, and am I back?
You're back, yes.
Okay, all right, we're ready to go.
Great job. You have a great, engaging personality in terms of when you present, and did a great job of aligning all of the things you were talking about with the research. I'll turn it over first to Dr. Pollock if you want to type in your first question in the chat, and then I'll read it out loud so we have it on the recording, and then you can go ahead and respond.
Okay.
Okay. It would be interesting to see what your study outcome is. Have you given any thought to placing information into context with regard to pre and post-pandemic perspectives on the research question?
Wow, I haven't thought about that, but now that you say that, that may be something to look into. I don't know if it's an appropriate time to change this study to reflect that, or maybe do it as a subsequent study, but there is definitely, the workforce has changed because of the pandemic. I mean, even within this study, I've had to change how I will conduct the interviews because of the results of the pandemic. And if we look out there, even now, there's a huge crisis at the ports, even here, with ships being stuck at sea because they can't unload them fast enough, and there are too many coming at one time. And even that is a result of things that happened during the pandemic. So I believe that that question you asked is something I'll have to give serious thought to, and maybe confer with Dr. Wentz and see what she thinks about either including that in this study or adding it to a one of the interview questions, or maybe something subsequent.
I'm not advocating changing this study, just wondering if the information you get in the interviews might be making mention of this.
I think that's good, because what that would allow me to do is not have to change things, but I could say it in the findings and still integrate that, which I'm already thinking of that. lots more things to explore. That's a perfect setup. So I really like that idea, and I think I may integrate it into what I'm doing.
Great. Turnover in an environment where hiring is a challenge makes retention all the more important. Might be interesting to see how that has impacted strategies. Thoughts?
Wow, that's another good question. You know, I think you're right, because what has to change is how the supervisors interact with the employees. I've spoken to a few supervisors within my personal network just through our conversation. They were telling me what it was like to keep employees at the beginning of the pandemic when they were receiving unemployment benefits, and the benefits was exceeding what they would have earned if they came to work. So they decided not to come to work, and they could not be terminated or participate in the turnover process because of the laws that were in place. So it was like a catch-22 for them. And when I heard that problem, I thought of exactly what you said, and it was that's something else to include and to also mention in the results. So thank you, Doctor. I appreciate that, because you've caused me to gain a new perspective on the things that I already was looking at.
Great. Dr. Pollock, do you have any additional questions? Okay, no additional questions. You clearly have a handle on the topic and study. Nice job on the presentation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
So I just have a few questions. You mentioned that you'll be collecting data until you reach data saturation. Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit more about how you know when you'll get there?
Oh, good question. So what we'll commonly see is they'll start to say the same things. The supervisors, when you interview them, what I'm looking for is answers that are similar to the same research questions, not research, but the interview questions, and things that may come out. Because I read something in a study, and I can't remember which one it is, but they were talking about people who are knowledgeable about a certain subject tend to agree on that subject at a higher percentage than those that have a rudimentary knowledge of the subject. So these are all professionals who know about these things. They live it, they see it every day. And I really think, and even I've noticed this in several other professions, that they tend to say the same things. I would even venture to say that if you all went to a symposium of university educators, and if they mention a problem or a strategy that you know is true, and if they said it, I know if you looked around, you'll see a lot of people nodding their heads in agreement. We've all done that at several points in time. So I think that with this, I won't see them nodding their heads in agreement, but I will hear them doing that through their answers to their questions.
Great. And you mentioned you're going to be using organizational documents as part of your study. Could you give some examples of the kind of documents that you think you might be using?
Sure. It could be employment policies. A lot of them have policies in place that, if you are late so many times, then, you go through that process of getting written up and going through that. It may be even job descriptions, that they put out to gain new people to come and fill in those positions. It could be a multitude of things. And that's why I included to have the supervisor provide any documents they may deem necessary, but that are publicly available since I'm not going through the company. So I'll say that there's a question mark there, because I don't know what they may suggest because of their expertise. But what I'm looking for is, like I said, employment handbooks, things like that. Maybe what their write-up form looks like, what things they look for. Or it can even be the rewards that they give for not violating a rule. So it could be any of those things used to triangulate that.
Great. And then my last question is about looking ahead. So after you get through IRB, one of the more challenging next steps can be to find the participants to participate in your study. And often you need to start off with a larger pool than the number that you actually need. So can you just talk a little bit more about how you'll identify your participants? Sure.
One good way to start, and I think as I've let you know in the past, I've worked in that world before. I was assistant general manager of a warehouse in this area. And working that, I've met many people. Also, the presence of Georgia ports in this area is tremendous. They have purchased parts of cities to use for their grounds. And the reason why I say that is because they have expanded so big, more employees work there. Thus, the more people I know that work in those places. So I know a great number of people that fit the bill for what I'm trying to do. And they know even more people. So the pool that I have to pull from, it starts at a small number that I know. I know I can put my hands on 6 people right now. But that grows exponentially because of their network. So their network is my network. So I start off with a huge number, and I have a lot to pull from, and there will be more people available for data saturation, because I think that's really important, because I would hate to get to that point where I need more people to achieve saturation, but I can't get them. That would be disastrous. So I kind of thought ahead on that, and I think that's a good way to begin.
Great. Those are all of my questions. I agree with Dr. Pollack that you really have a solid understanding of this study, and you seem really passionate about it. So that's great. Dr. Pollack, do you have anything to add before we dismiss Simone from the call? And while he's thinking about that, Simone, do you have any questions for us?
Just right now, nothing up front. And concerning the study, I know I'm in communication with you through our comments to one another, which I thoroughly enjoy. So I will have some more for you on that point concerning this. And I know there are recordings of it because I'm doing this for my children, and I want them to be able to see what I'm going through. And I want them to reach higher. So I would like to have this so I can show it to them, and that they would know, because like my wife said this morning, you know, they can't wait for this to be over because she's lost her husband and they've lost their dad. For me, it's been 5 years. 5 years, because I've done the MBA and then now the DBA at Walden. So I want to be able to show them this. So if I could get a copy of this, that would be awesome.
Yes, it will definitely be available to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
wonderful.
So great job. That's a great story. So we'll ask you to leave the call and then stay by your phone, because I'll be giving you a call back in probably a few minutes.
Okay. Well, can't wait to hear from you.
All right, thanks.
Okay. All of you guys have a nice day, and I'll be seeing you at the next oral presentation.
All right. Bye. And I'm just going to